Microsoft AZ-500 exam practice questions with explanations are available in the video for you to study. You need to ensure that you can meet the security operations requirements. What should you do first? A. Turn on auto-provisioning in Security Center. B. Integrate Security Center and Microsoft Cloud App Security. C. Upgrade the pricing tier of Security Center to Standard. D. Modify the Security Center workspace configuration. The answer is C. The Standard tier extends the capabilities of the free tier to workloads running in private and other public clouds, providing unified security management and threat protection across your hybrid cloud workloads. The Standard tier also adds advanced threat detection capabilities, which uses built-in behavioral analytics and machine learning to identify attacks and zero-day exploits, access and application controls to reduce exposure to network attacks and malware, and more. Scenario: Security operations requirements. Litware must be able to customize the operating system security configurations in Azure Security Center. You need to encrypt storage 1 to meet the technical requirements. Which key vaults can you use? A. Key Vault 1 only. B. Key Vault 2 and Key Vault 3 only. C. Key Vault 1 and Key Vault 3 only. D. Key Vault 1, Key Vault 2 and Key Vault 3. The answer is B. The storage account and the key vault must be in the same region and in the same Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant, but they can be in different subscriptions. Storage 1 is in the West US region. Key Vault 1 is the only key vault in the same region. You have Azure Resource Manager templates that you use to deploy Azure virtual machines. You need to disable unused Windows features automatically as instances of the virtual machines are provisioned. What should you use? A. Device compliance policies in Microsoft Intune. B. Azure Automation State Configuration. C. Application Security Groups. D. Azure Advisor. The answer is B. You can use Azure Automation State Configuration to manage Azure VMs, both Classic and Resource Manager, on-premises VMs, Linux machines, Oz VMs, and on-premises physical machines. Note: Azure Automation State Configuration provides a DSC pull server similar to the Windows feature DSC service so that target nodes automatically receive configurations, conform to the desired state, and report back on their compliance. The built-in pull server in Azure Automation eliminates the need to set up and maintain your own pull server. Azure Automation can target virtual or physical Windows or Linux machines, in the cloud or on-premises. You are configuring an Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS, cluster that will connect to an Azure Container Registry. You need to use the auto-generated service principal to authenticate to the Azure Container Registry. What should you create? A. An Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, group. B. An Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, role assignment. C. An Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, user. D. A secret in Azure Key Vault. The answer is B. When you create an AKS cluster, Azure also creates a service principal to support cluster operability with other Azure resources. You can use this auto-generated service principal for authentication with an ACR registry. To do so, you need to create an Azure AD role assignment that grants the cluster's service principal access to the container registry. Your company has an Azure subscription named Sub1 that is associated to an Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant named Contoso.com. The company develops an application named App1. App1 is registered in Azure AD. You need to ensure that App1 can access secrets in Azure Key Vault on behalf of the application users. What should you configure? A. An application permission without admin consent. B. A delegated permission without admin consent. C. A delegated permission that requires admin consent. D. An application permission that requires admin consent. The answer is B. Delegated permissions. Your client application needs to access the web API as the signed-in user, but with access limited by the selected permission. This type of permission can be granted by a user unless the permission requires administrator consent. Incorrect answers. A. D. Application permissions. Your client application needs to access the web API directly as itself. No user context. This type of permission requires administrator consent and is also not available for public, desktop and mobile, client applications. You have an Azure SQL database. You implement Always Encrypted. You need to ensure that application developers can retrieve and decrypt data in the database. Nonce of information should you provide to the developers? Each correct answer presents part of the solution. Note: each correct selection is worth 1 point. A. A stored access policy. B. A shared access signature, SAS. C. The column encryption key. D. User credentials. E. The column master key. The answer is CE. Always Encrypted uses two types of keys: column encryption keys and column master keys. A column encryption key is used to encrypt data in an encrypted column. A column master key is a key-protecting key that encrypts one or more column encryption keys. You have an Azure SQL database server named SQL 1. You plan to turn on advanced threat protection for SQL 1 to detect all threat detection types. Which action will advanced threat protection detect as a threat? A. A user updates more than 50% of the records in a table. B. A user attempts to sign as select asterisk from table 1. C. A user is added to the DB_owner database role. D. A user deletes more than 100 records from the same table. The answer is B. Advanced threat protection can detect potential SQL injections. This alert is triggered when an active exploit happens against an identified application vulnerability to SQL injection. This means the attacker is trying to inject malicious SQL statements using the vulnerable application code or stored procedures. You have 15 Azure virtual machines in a resource group named RG1. All virtual machines run identical applications. You need to prevent unauthorized applications and malware from running on the virtual machines. What should you do? A. Apply an Azure policy to RG1. B. From Azure Security Center, configure adaptive application controls. C. Configure Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, identity protection. D. Apply a resource lock to RG1. The answer is B. Adaptive Application Control is an intelligent, automated end-to-end application whitelisting solution from Azure Security Center. It helps you control which applications can run on your Azure and non-Azure VMs, Windows and Linux, which, among other benefits, helps harden your VMs against malware. Security Center uses machine learning to analyze the applications running on your VMs and helps you apply the specific whitelisting rules using this intelligence. Your company plans to create separate subscriptions for each department. Each subscription will be associated to the same Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, tenant. You need to configure each subscription to have the same role assignments. What should you use? A. Azure Security Center. B. Azure Policy. C. Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, PIM. D. Azure Blueprints. The answer is D. Just as a blueprint allows an engineer or an architect to sketch a project's design parameters, Azure Blueprints enables cloud architects and central information technology groups to define a repeatable set of Azure resources that implements and adheres to an organization's standards, patterns, and requirements. Blueprints are a declarative way to orchestrate the deployment of various resource templates and other artifacts such as role assignments, policy assignments, Azure Resource Manager templates, resource groups. You are configuring and securing a network environment. You deploy an Azure virtual machine named VM1 that is configured to analyze network traffic. You need to ensure that all network traffic is routed through VM1. What should you configure? A. A system root. B. A network security group, NSG. C. A user-defined root. The answer is C. Although the use of system routes facilitates traffic automatically for your deployment, there are cases in which you want to control the routing of packets through a virtual appliance. You can do so by creating user-defined routes that specify the next hop for packets flowing to a specific subnet to go to your virtual appliance instead, and enabling IP forwarding for the VM running as the virtual appliance. Note: user-defined routes. For most environments you will only need the system routes already defined by Azure. However, you may need to create a route table and add one or more routes in specific cases, such as forced tunneling to the Internet via your on-premises network. Use of virtual appliances in your Azure environment. In the scenarios above, you will have to create a route table and add user-defined routes to it.